I came back to a lot of problems, by the way. Like, many people would look at that and say, oh God, I wish I never took that month off. I came back and thought, thank God, because there's so many things came out. I'm curious, what did you do during your sabbatical? Whatever it was pretty powerful, because you came out of that like a freight train, with what you're doing right now.
I'm not coming out of the sabbatical until I feel passionate about doing something. I'll stay in it on as long as it takes. Right. I have no, so I had no group calls, no actual phone. I had literally nothing. Right. I had no commitments whatsoever. The first time in my life that I didn't have commitments, and the first time in my life that I was quite literally like, I will do anything, whatever the universe tells me to do, I'm going to do.
$100 million a year, but not by building a single company that does that, because that's actually harder. Newsletters, raising investor capital using literally a Google Doc, and just a lot of other fascinating things that we're going to talk about with our guest today. Before we even started the episode, he already said, hey, we already had an episode, because he saw me pouring water, and he's like, we need to upgrade your water. Your water sucks. And I was like, all right, this is going to be a powerful episode. So today I'm introducing you to a person that I don't know how I got a hold of or how I met, but we've been talking, and I've been following him now for, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And the more I see what he's doing, and the more I see how he thinks, not only just about entrepreneurship, but about life and about experiences, more I'm like, how have we not become like best friends, all of us, over these last so many years? We think the same, we're doing the same, we share a lot of notes. And I'm excited to have him on here today to really get to know him better, and to give you an opportunity to learn from him. So without further ado, everybody, help me introduce us to this podcast. Scott Oldford. Scott, what's up, my friend? Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely excited to be here and jam and have some fun. And I feel the similar. I have no idea how we became friends on Facebook, but we did. And then, I started seeing your stuff, and then we started seeing each other's stuff, and here we are.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I told Scott before the podcast started, I said, you're like me, but you're white with a beard. It's like I felt like that much synergy, man. Down to the audience you're targeting and to the types of marketers you want to teach and work with. I mean, I made a pivot recently, over the last, 9, 10 months, where I was like 20 years of having taught what I call newbies, with full due respect, newbies. It's just time to upgrade, time to move. I've learned so much, having built companies to multiple 8 figures. I was like, I just want to be able to teach some of that stuff, because it's time. But Scott, we'll start right out. Give me, so the synopsis, we'll work backwards, right? The thing that fascinates me about you, and I think it's going to fascinate our listeners, is you're running $100 million a year portfolio of companies. You're not like in this big stuffy office, working that CEO life. You seem to be pretty chill, living your life in a much more simpler way. So you got this thing figured out, which is like running a large number, right? $100 million, but doing it like with a lifestyle and having fun and not being stressed out. That's where we're going to get. I want to see what led up to that. Tell me a little bit about when you got started, how you got started. Take me back to like when Scott discovered the world of internet. What were you doing before this?
Yeah. So I had my first business when I was 7.
Okay.
selling eggs on my parents' acreage. Made my first $20,000 when I was 8. And by the time I was also like in the programming, and I was doing all this stuff, kind of like I was doing online marketing, quote unquote marketing, and communities. Like my first community was for, remember those Palm Pilots? Yeah. So I had a community with like 20,000 people active a day talking about Palm Pilots when I was 9, 10 years old. So go on until I'm 16. I had $1 million a year business. And then, that just kind of brought all these different types of amazing opportunities. And then, like majority of entrepreneurs, if they get to $1 million, end up losing $1 million and losing, what they have at least once, if not twice, before they kind of keep it and are able to actually use money and invest in those types of things. So by the time I'm 21, lost it all, $1 million in debt, living in a 300 square foot basement apartment in St. John's, Newfoundland in Canada, in the little middle of nowhere. And so I'm 31 now, And so that was, 10 years ago. And, learned a lot on business. Even though I failed, I learned a lot on business and marketing and sales and all these different types of things. But like, I wasn't like an internet marketer. You know what I mean? Like most internet marketers came from copywriting or came from, those different styles. I was not that. And then, so I got myself out of the debt, and in 2015, I launched like an online program. I didn't even know what an online program was. I just put together a Google Doc, and I had a Facebook group of people, like 1,400 people that I like knew that were also business owners. I said, hey, anyone want to do this? And I think it was like 22 people paid $1,100. And I was like, oh my God, this is, at the time I was running an agency and it was stressful. And yeah, it was a $3-4 million a year business, but it was like 80, 90 hours a week. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much better. Did $3 million in that business the following year in 2016. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go, teach people what I know about marketing and sales. And then it turned into scaling businesses. And that brought me up until about 2019. I ended up, growing a business that was, and also an 8-figure business, had a, 40, 50 person team. And I hated that. I hated it. I'm not a CEO. I don't want to be a CEO. And I also don't like big infrastructure. Like I'm not a big infrastructure type of person. But I've grown close to 300 businesses past 7 or multiple 7 figures at this point. And then in 2020, I took a sabbatical and said, what do I want to do for the next 20 years of my life? So I took a 6-month sabbatical, and then I was like, okay, you know what? I want to do what I do, but I want to do more of an investment advisory approach versus, people paying me money for what I do. I'm I'm over 3 years into the process of going from, being a pure mentorship and kind of coaching company to more of investment and advisory. And I got about probably 2 more years of that transition to go. And so today we own 36 companies, I believe, 36 companies, that'll do somewhere between 120 to 150 million in 2023. Maybe more depending on, acquisition and those different types of things. I now work like 25, 30 hours a week, only 6 hours to 8 hours a week on phone calls. And either this all works and, it's 2 options. Either this works and makes me a billionaire, or it doesn't work. And, I just keep on doing my thing and, writing books about what didn't work. So that's kind of where I am right now. And it's a fun place to be. I wake up every day and like, there's a new set of problems and challenges. It's not like the same business. So it's like this thing and this thing and this thing. But because I have ADHD, I like love having like lots of different things happening at once. Whereas I always used to get super bored just having like the same business. So that's a little bit of that's a quick version of from here to there and kind of back again.
Sure. Man, my hands got tired because I'm like writing questions. I was like, all right, because there's like parts you said, I'm like, I gotta ask about that. I gotta ask about this. First of all, it's funny. We started the podcast where I was like, hey, Scott told me exactly what type of water to drink to like, cure myself. No, I didn't say cure myself. Disclaimer, it can't cure you. But people might be wondering like, what water is it? And so I don't know if you want to hold the bottle up. It's called Holstein.
I'll hold the bottle. I'm about to be a sponsor of it, so I guess it's an early spot. I'll send this a clip and tell them I'm already. It's Hellstein.
Hellstein. All right, Hellstein. So, yeah, and you specifically said. So, I mean, I've got a problem with inflammation. So, and he said it's the first one that's really going to be.
It's the clinical trials to be done later this year, but they're doing the triple clinical trial. But by then, it'll be the first water that is clinically proven to reduce inflammation.
When that happens, do introduce me to the founder of it. I'd love to have him on the podcast to talk about water. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to introduce you to him. He's a cool. His father started the company in 1998, and wow. I want to own a water company at some point because I'm fascinated by water. And so anyways, it's just a really cool story. Like their whole family had basically built this water company. Anyways, another conversation for another day.
Let's keep picking apart the similarities. So number one, you said you fell $1 million in debt. What was the age? 19, 20, 21?
Yeah, it was like between 19 and 21 kind of journey.
So you had me beat because I was 26 years old. I fell $1.7 million in debt. and then I nearly lost it all one more time. And you also mentioned that. You said most people that make $1 million
I lost it all. I lost it all a second time too.
There we go. So I
let that one out, but
Yeah.
that was that one was a little, that one wasn't really that hard because, you know, at a certain, like when I was 19, like that was actually purely very difficult to get out of. The second time it took 3 months. So you know, the first time it was like really difficult. The second time it was like a blip on the radar.
So same exact here. First time, nearly life ending, almost drove me to alcoholism, major health issues, hospitalization.
I used to wake up at 6 a.m. and smoke weed.
There you go. Yeah. So the first one was horrendous. The second one, tough. But one big difference is you learn from each of them, right? So the first one, what I learned is my entire net worth, personal, professional, whatever, was in the company. So when my company went kaboom and I went to $1.7 million in debt, I hadn't personally taken care of myself because I was young and I was just all about the business. I learned a lesson from that. And before, you know, so now what I started doing after that was when I came back, I started kind of separating personal and professional. And so that was like, if the company falls apart again, at least personally, and that the second time around, that was really helpful because it mentally kept me straight because I didn't feel like I was going to, you know, not have food on the table. What I wanted to talk to you about, and then of course, by the way, then you mentioned, hey, I want to own a water company. So I've had a lot of health issues in my life. I've got Crohn's disease. I've had many surgeries. It's a whole Bollywood film if you want one day. But I want to own a supplement company one day. It's been a big dream of mine to own, especially for digestive health. And, you know, I've always talked about that. So it's interesting that we've got, you know, similarities there. Let's break this down. Scott, why do people, because I feel like a lot of people listening right now that maybe haven't made their first million or whatever in their lives, you're right. Most people that make it lose it and sometimes go through that cycle again and again. But what's crazy is most of them who keep at it, when they bounce back there, I've noticed every time I build, I fall. Maybe I don't go broke, but I always fall a little. Then I build again and I end up at double of where I was. And then I'll fall again. And then I build again and I end up double. What the hell's going on? Why did you make such a strong statement that everyone who makes $1 million loses $1 million? Like, what have you seen to do that?
Statistically speaking, it's something like, you know, most millionaires have lost. I think it's like, I had to look it up, but I mean, I looked it up at one point, and statistically speaking, entrepreneurial led millionaires, meaning not retirements and not, you know, they got stock options. I think the chances of losing it twice is 80%. Or something crazy like that. Oh, very, wow. Very, very, very high percentage. And so there's a lot of things at play. And my next book coming out, Million in the Red, which is all the lessons I've learned about money. And I don't exactly know when that's going to come, but it'll be in probably the next 6 months. It talks a lot about this because, like the thing is, the first million or the first time that you make $1 million, most of the time, I would say that you are lucky and you don't realize you're lucky. You know, the first time, like majority of the people that I have helped become millionaires have unfair advantages that they don't realize. It's competent incompetence, or confident incompetence. And so it's like you didn't realize that you had this specific skill set, and then you had these specific connections, and you had this specific scenario, and you were at the right time at the right place. And so for the most part, you end up kind of abusing that right time, right place because you're lucky and you don't know that you're lucky. I'd say that that's one of the big parts. And then I'd say the second part is, you know, the ego always wants more, right? Our ego always wants more and more and more and more and more. And so there's like a version of us that wants to like build this big, massive thing. And that big, massive thing generally makes it so that we start spending money on things that I would call our ego maintenance, right? So having big teams, having, you know, 12 supercars going on, you know, and I'm not against any of these things done in the right time, but you know, when you make your first $1 million, is it the most smartest thing to go out and buy a $250,000 car, or should you do that once you have 10? And so there's that. And then I also think there's an element of wounding from our parents in our past that also come up from a personal development perspective, where, you know, when I was 8 years old, I had my, you remember, were you ever in the Pokemon by chance?
Never. No, never.
No. Okay. All right. Well, I was super in the Pokemon when I was a kid. And one of the most important cards were the Charizard. and I had this beautiful Charizard Pokemon card, and it got stolen from me. My entire Pokemon collection got stolen from me one day when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I internalized that as, if I have money, I need to spend it because someone's going to steal it.
Wow.
Right? I internalized that. And so then as soon as I got money, I was like, well, let me get rid. And then when I lost all my money, I said, well, you know what? If I have money, once I got money again, like after I was 21, 23, 24, I then started just spending money on everything I possibly could, because I was like, well, it's going to go away, right? It's going to go away. I might as well have a good time. And so there's a lot of things that happen that make it so that people make, decisions that are generally based in the past, or decisions that are, they don't realize that they might be a little bit lucky. And I would consider myself, being 31, where I am, very lucky. And I continually try to make myself luckier every single day. But I also, nowadays, I know I'm lucky. And I wake up every day and I don't assume I'm going to be successful. I wake up every single day and be like, is today that, I'm not at the right time and right place, and let me try to make it so I am at the right time and right place. So there's a lot of those things. And honestly, I think you should lose it all, because I think that that's what makes you have the tenacity and the persistence to be able to wake up every morning and be like, you know what, doesn't matter what happened today, I've got this shit.
All right.
Because I bet you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I do. And actually, there's something you said that I'm going to pick apart a little bit. Maybe I have found something that you and I might not agree on. So let's see. That would be fun. But I lost my money very simply because my first time around is what I've always joked. I mean, I was crushing it. So I graduated college. It took me 18, 19 months to finally figure out how to do something. I was trying throughout college and I couldn't do it. Finally, I figured it out. And once I figured it out, and it's funny you mentioned most of us come from like the internet marketing. I got stuck somehow. I found my way into the internet marketing world, and somehow my mentor became Justin Ford, who is Mark Ford's younger brother. That's Michael Masterson's younger brother, who somehow convinced me to do the one thing I hate the most in the world, which is writing. And he convinced me to become a copywriter under him. He taught me for a year and a half, and I owe my life to him. So it's fun. You're right. I came into this space as a copywriter. That's kind of how I got my entry. And then once I started having success, I swear I had the golden touch complex, and it was just everything I touched was just boom, 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 boom. And my company's growing, it's building. I got offices in India now. I'm growing. I'm doing that CEO life, man. I'm first class flying. I'm speaking on stage. I'm doing it. And I didn't buy the expensive cars, gold jewelry, none of that crap. I was all about investing in the business. And 2008 happened, and I lacked total wisdom because the market completely collapsed. But that did not hit our industry for about a year and a half. It takes a little time. And I just kept trying to double down and grow. And then all of a sudden it just imploded. So for me, I've always thought back to it and thought what happened was, first of all, was just a golden touch. My super, super overconfidence. I mean, I just felt like I was untouchable. Number two was just lack of knowledge and wisdom. This time around, when I saw the market and the economy start doing some funky stuff last year, I was like, been there, done that, not doing this again, and readjusted, calibrated and prepared. So something to be said about experience. But you're absolutely right. Most people I know that have made a lot have actually gone on to lose a lot. You're also right that most people should, because my biggest lessons have been learned in those moments, and I wouldn't be where I am today, which is, I'm probably 3 to 4x bigger now than my first, maybe 5x bigger now than my first big collapse. And I credit it to that. Okay, you said something about the word luck. I've always said that word makes me scream. I don't like being like, I remember once someone told me you're lucky, and I almost wanted to take my shoe and beat them with it, because I've literally got actual battle scars on my body. I've been through surgeries. I've been through all this. I've taken myself. I was in the ICU 3 months. They literally had a 50-50 chance of me dying, and still I was on a BlackBerry phone running my business, because I was like, damn it, if I'm alive, if I'm breathing, I'm working, man. I'm not going to just sit here and let myself die. And so sometimes I'm like, man, that's not luck. That's you creating your own quote unquote luck. Like, that's you getting out there and harnessing it. So I've never really looked at myself as lucky. But then you did say one part where you're like, right place, right time. But in order to be at the right place, right time,
but that's luck. But we can influence luck, right? Like for example, someone could say, well, you're lucky because either one of us, you're lucky because you have this like massive network of all, like we can't go broke at this point, right? You take everything from us, you literally take all of our money, all of our company, everything. We both go on Facebook. We make $5 million in a year just typing words, right? Yeah. And so that so that someone could say that that's luck, and in reality that is somewhat luck, right? But we created the luck. So I think it's mostly about just the definition of luck. I mean, it's not luck in the sense of you're lucky because charm. Yeah. It's not lucky from a perspective of like,
okay, so it's not luck like lottery luck, like you won exactly. And so I would call it good fortune. I'm blessed. And you're absolutely right. I don't think I've ever for even a moment's notice gone to sleep worried about, could there possibly be a possible future where my daughter doesn't have food on the table? Like, no. I'd call up my friends. I'd have consulting gigs lined up. I'd have things I can do. I could turn to my personal Facebook. I have turned to my personal Facebook and been able to turn that into millions in the past. So but then I say, hey, that's 20 years of hard work. That's a lot of effort. So you're right. Influence it, good fortune, be blessed, but it all comes from input, right? I think luck, the way the society describes it, is lack of input, miraculous output. And that I just, I can never get behind. Yeah. All right. So
they're really, to go on one last part of the right time, right place, which is like, like, for example, look at all the stuff that's going on in AI. So like, look at all really a lot of people have been working on AI since, 2014, 2015, right? Like a lot of the stuff that's finally come to fruition started at around that time. And I used to be a programmer. So I understand that stuff really well. And I've understood where AI is going to bring us and so on. And I don't really necessarily want to get into that today, but like this hype cycle that's happening right now, that's right time, right place. That's somebody that you couldn't really necessarily predict that.
No.
Right. And you could predict that's going to happen at some point in the next 20 years, but you didn't exactly know when. And so you have these AI companies that are blowing up right now with investment and everything else because, it was just right time, right place. And so I think there's sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize when they are on a trend that they didn't actually create themselves.
Yeah,
that's what I'm most.
And so I agree. And to the same degree, though, look how long the people behind ChatGPT were working on. OpenAI has been going at it for years, and was a vision of many billionaires who came together and created a nonprofit that somehow has become an incredibly profitable for-profit. I haven't really figured that. Have not figured that transition out. That's a pretty miraculous transition, but some funny bookkeeping has been done there. But point is, it was being worked on for years, and ChatGPT didn't just show up one morning and become miraculous. That thing probably has sucked for years while they were working on it, and now when they came out with it. So cool. Well, I'm glad. I wanted everyone to hear that even though luck is being used, Scott and I just define. We could agree on a different definition of it, but not the lottery winning luck definition. Okay, so another interesting part I want to dive into. You said 2019, you're running an 8-figure business, 40 to 50 person team. You don't love it, and then you took a sabbatical, and you're like, in 2020, you're like, I just want to figure out what I want to do. What'd you do with that business? What was that business, and what'd you do with it?
So 2019, we had 96 7-figure plus businesses that we were mentoring and built. So it was a 6-figure investment type of business. Okay. It was kind of like, it was the early version of what I'm working on right now, but I wasn't ready for my current business model. It grew too fast. I made a lot of bad decisions. And in reality, I didn't really want the company. I shouldn't have built the company. And I sort of like just ended up at the right time at the right place. And and in some ways, maybe got like talked into growing the company. And then partially, I was in LA and I was at all these, famous people's houses and billionaire houses. And I was like, well, shit, I want to create something of substance, not because of like any other reason, just to kind of like fit in, if I'm honest. And that's a bad path. You should never do anything to fit in, especially when it comes to business, because it's just going to, not do well. And I mean, I also just worked myself out of a job. I didn't have anything else. I didn't have anything to do. And I'm a creative. I'm a creator. I'm an innovator. I want to do things. And so there was that. And the company was being ran like a startup that had like endless amount of money. And it was, running out of my bank account. And I had a decision that I had to make. I was like, am I going to go raise money, or I'm going to go and put the rest of my remaining personal, like you talked about, personal capital into this? And so I said, you know what? No, I don't want to do either of those things, because I don't really want to do this. And so I sold part of it, shut the other part of it down. And I think it cost me about $1.1 million to shut that company down of my own personal money. Wow. So I think that business made about $16 million. I took $1.2 million out of it during that time. I put $1.1 million back. So I'd worked a year and a half of my life and made $100,000.
And I know that feeling all too well. Okay, so you shut it down and you go on a sabbatical. Another area where you and I have something very similar, because in 2019, before pandemic, I was, the business was doing great. And I put quotes around great, because you can look at a business and financially it can look great. But I always believe a business is as healthy as is the entrepreneur. That entrepreneur behind it, the leader of the business, if they are not feeling healthy, the business is built on what do they call it? Built on a house of cards. So I wasn't quite there. I wasn't living the lifestyle I wanted. My health was deteriorating. I was constantly stressed. I was running a big team at that time, probably 30, 40, 50 people. And I had a coach, a life coach, and she challenged me to do something, which was life-changing. And she said, I need you, in order for us to continue working together, you need to pick a month where you are going to disconnect. You're just going to go away. And I freaked out. I'm like, are you out of your mind? I was like, my business is not capable of managing that. And she's like, well, I didn't say you have to do it next month. If you'd like to take a few months to prep for it, but you have to take a month, you have 6 months. Within those 6 months, you have to tell me which one month you're going to completely take off. And I did. And I did take that month off. And I'll tell you, half the shit in the company hit the fan. Lots of people quit. And so many things came just striking out at us. It was just like, by going away for a while, coming back in, realizing just how much some of the people in the company were just like, it was like they were hanging on to me, man. It's like, it's like the example I use right now as a joke is like my 10-month-old baby. She just learned to stand up. So like right now, if you're around her, all she wants to do is grab you and pull herself up, because she loves doing that. And it felt like there were people in the company that were just doing that. It was like zombies crawling on me. And when I disappeared, they didn't have anything to crawl on. They filtered out, they left out. It was the most cathartic month of my life. I came back to a lot of problems, by the way. Like many people would look at that and say, oh God, I wish I never took that month off. I came back and thought, thank God, because there's so many things came out. I'm curious, what did you do during your sabbatical? Whatever it was pretty powerful, because you came out of that like a freight train with what you're doing right now.
It's really interesting, because when I mentor and advise people, I get them to take off 1 week every 3 months where they can't connect to their business to figure out what's broken in their business. One of the easiest things to do is go on a vacation for a week and just like literally no email, no connection, no anything, to do the exact thing that you're talking about in a slightly more controlled way, but it's very much the similar thing. And it's a really good exercise. So I took off 6 months. And so what I did, so coming out of 2019, 2020 was amazing. I had no team, and it was like I made like $5.5 million that year in 2020 on like a couple of offers. And so at the end of 2020, I was like, all right, sweet. I just profited a ridiculous amount of money for really not working that much. I took off, I think, 5 months of 2020. And I was like, I'm going to do a sabbatical. And I said, I'm not coming out of the sabbatical until I feel passionate about doing something. I'll stay in it on as long as it takes. Right. I have so I had no group calls, no actual phone. I had literally nothing. right? I had no commitments whatsoever. The first time in my life that I didn't have commitments, and the first time in my life that I was quite literally like, I will do anything, whatever the universe tells me to do, I'm going to do. I might be in the AI, I might be day trading, I don't know, but I'm going to consciously decide my path instead of just what I have done pretty much my entire life, particularly since I went into debt, which is when you're in debt, you're like, well, what can I do to get out of debt? And then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm in a situation now where I get to consciously choose what I spend the next 30 years of my life doing. And also knowing that we were planning to have a kid in a couple of years, which I now do. So I wanted to be like, all right, let me figure out what this pivot is, because if I can avoid it, pivot while I'm having a kid. So I took that time, and I think so. It started in October. It was October to April, I think it was, and so 2020 into 2021. And for the first few months, I just played video games, and I bought a McLaren, and I drove, and I just kind of like hung out. We bought this house, and I didn't really honestly do a whole lot of anything. Played with day trading and crypto, and had some fun there, and spent wasted some money, made some money, and I was like, no, this is stressful. I don't want to do any of this stuff. I started talking to people about investing, talk to people, on AI, and I did all sorts of things. And then finally, I think it was March of 2021, and my wife was gone to, or maybe it was April, but she was gone for 10 days with her mom to like a retreat. And so I was by myself for 10 days. It was 7 days or 10 days. And I loved that. I loved having that time to myself. And during that time, it really kind of started coming together. And I mean, also at the time, I was like, how long is this going to take? How long is this sabbatical going to take? But it was nice. It was a time to recharge. And so it was very much okay, here's what we're going to go build over the next, 10 or 20 years. And it wasn't clear. It wasn't like, here's exactly what, but it was like, this is the direction. And the direction was, Scott, you're really good at what you do. Why go try to do something where the learning curve is going to take you another 10 years? Like you're legendary at what you do. Let's utilize this, but let's utilize it in a different way. Let's go from being, owning and operating businesses to advising and investing in businesses. And let's have hundreds of businesses, which was largely borrowed from Richard Branson, because the year prior I was at Necker Island, and I talked to Richard, and I understood his business model. And from understanding his business model, and I've met and been mentored by, I don't know, almost a dozen billionaires, been mentored by about 4. And he was the only person I met where I was like, I want to repeat that. That was the only person. Every single other person, I was like, wow, they're stressed, or they're just not in alignment, or they're just not having a good time. Yeah. And so his business model is very similar. He has all these businesses, but then I asked him, hey, how many team members do you talk to on a daily basis? He's like 6. I was like, well, that sounds great. Yeah. And so that was that's what kind of came out of that sabbatical. And it was a fun time, and it was a pivotal time, and it was, I wouldn't want to do it again right now, because I got so much energy for what I'm doing. But at the time I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be in this online business stuff anymore. I might just hang up my hat and do something new. And I think the cool part of unattachment, like letting go of the attachment of what your business is or your identity, is then you can consciously go back and say, yeah, you know what? I actually want to do that, versus, well, I just kind of ended up here.
So much wisdom in that. How many months again was your sabbatical that ended up lasting? 6 months. So something I want everyone who's listening to take away from that is like, sometimes, guys, I think a lot of us type A entrepreneurs, especially, we're so like, gotta go. We're trying so actively to find the opportunity that we're blind to the ones that are right around us. And the example that really helped change my life, I go back to this all the time. This is a very specific example that I remember. I was 25, 26 years old. That part, I don't remember exactly how old. And, wasn't dating, didn't care. I remember my parents were a little bit like, what's going on with this guy? I was busy. I mean, I was going back and forth between India every month. I would go to India 7 times a year. From the US, everyone, that's a 24-hour journey each way. And then when I was in India, I'd be there for a month, and then that month I'd travel to Malaysia, Singapore, speak. When I was in the US for a month, I was traveling all over the US to speak. I was barely home ever, so I didn't have time. I was building, I was doing my business, and I remember one very distinct conversation I had with a friend, and he was dating a girl for a long time, getting ready to get married. He's one of my closest friends, and he was like, Anik, when are you going to start getting serious about like finding a girl or like dating and like taking that part of your life seriously? I look him dead in the eyes and I said, I have zero interest in relationships right now. I want nothing to do with it. I am not looking for a girlfriend. And when the time comes, it will come, but I'm not looking and I won't look. 3 days later, I fly to India and we had hired a whole bunch of new people in the office. I walk into the office, and I've told this story before many times, and my wife hates it when I tell the story, but I tell it all the time anyways. I walk into the office, I take a left turn, I'm walking down. There's like, our office was excuse my language, this was a shithole. I didn't help pick it. When I got there, I was appalled. I'm like, what is this piece of crap place that we just signed a lease on? It was like a call center. Like everyone's desk was like this big. It was like literally 3 feet. And like everyone's like crammed in. And I'm walking past and everyone's wearing the Learn shirt. They were super excited because like the big boss has come, right? And I remember as a Bollywood moment, off in the back corner, there was an actual halo spotlight on this girl sitting at the very far back corner. And her hair was flowing. There was somehow a breeze that was only like, that was only for her. And I remember I didn't give a crap about anybody else. I was locked eyes on her as I'm walking past. I walk into my cabin in the back. The manager of the office comes running in. He's like, hey, how was your flight? Welcome, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, shh. And he's like, what? I'm like, shh. I'm like, who's that girl in the corner? He's like, what are you talking about? And he like goes around and looks around the corner. He comes back. He's like, that's Andrea. She just started our customer support department. This is my exact reaction. I said, shit. And he goes, what? And I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. And he's just laughing at me. He's like, what? I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. He's like, please don't say that outside. Like, there's some sexual harassment shit that could happen. Like, don't say anything. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, man. I don't even want this. But that's the girl I'm going to marry. I'm like, and it was like, so I remember, I go back and I think about that moment all the time where I'm like, man, it is when you least expect, least seek something. So to those of you who are right now, like feeling like I can't find that thing, just you know what? Take 2 steps back. Just take 2 steps back.
You just got to focus on, I love the phrase, chop wood, carry water. And I had a very similar experience where in 2017, my 20s was about building businesses and then either blowing them up or selling them. You know what I mean? Like that was basically my entire 20s. And, so in 2017, very successful, everything, I had the debt paid off, everything else, but I was so unhappy, like super unhappy. And so I was like, okay, cool, sweet. I know money's not going to make me happy, whatever. So I'm just going to go nomadic. I'm going to travel the world, and I'm just going to travel the world until I kind of like figure out myself. Right. So I guess I was probably 26 at this point, or 25, 26. So I just like upended my life in Canada and just so happened to end up going to California for a month. And 3 weeks in, I meet my now wife for tacos. And I wasn't looking for that at all. I was ready to go travel the world and meet people and live that version of a life. And 6 months later, we ended up married, and now we have a kid. And then there was that moment at the taco shop, and, there was a business context for this. And I'm like, within the first minute of meeting her, I'm like, oh shit, like, this is not good. Like my heart was beating, like, and I'm a pretty, I was a pretty chill guy, on that. And I'm like, and that night I'm like in the parking garage with her number open, being like, I gotta like ask her out. I had 1 day left in LA, I had 1 day left. And we went on a date that next night. And I had bookings to South America to go and travel down there, canceled all of it, rented a place in Malibu for 3 months. And I was like, you know what? Let's see what happens. And
Wow.
that's what happened. And you just, you just can't be too thirsty, because the in life, because it's like the desire you have, the opposite of desire is resistance. So when you're desiring something too much, you literally create resistance from it, because you're just obsessed about it. You're too focused on it. And so if you're too focused, it'll just like pass you by.
You're clingy. No one likes a clingy person. You're clingy.
And it's just like if you're on a sales call, and you can feel that person like needs that sale.
The desperation. Yeah. I'll give another example, and then we will move past this topic, everybody. I promise. But the thing is, this is such an important thing, because you might be a student right now, you might be a professional, you might be an entrepreneur, and the idea of a sabbatical, the idea of just take a deep breath and step back. Sometimes you got to slow down to speed up your time. You've got plenty of time. But last year, this is pretty recent for me. Last year, I was going through this whole like, I don't want to teach to the same audience anymore. I'm tired. I'm burned out. I want something a little different. What do I want? And I was going through this journey where I was like, man, am I burned out? Do I just go buy a bunch of Subways? Like, I went through the whole thing, man. And it was driving me nuts. And this is right. Of course, this all started, by the way, within a few weeks of me having my daughter. So I can't be.
Yeah. Same thing happened. Same thing
yeah.
happened to me last year when I had my son.
Yeah. So there you go. Right. So again, why you got to just basically you're me with a beard, but that's okay. We have a lot of similarities, and so everyone's like, I never even figured that out. By the way, it was like months later. I'm talking to a friend. They're like, is this because you had a kid? And I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with that. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, wait, it started like a few weeks after I had her. I'm like, maybe you're right, but I quickly realized one thing. I was like, I'm driving myself insane. I'm up all night. I'm like strategizing and I'm like forcing crap. I'm trying to put square, round things into squares or whatever, right? So I was like, stop it. So I asked myself one thing. I'm like, what is one thing I have control over right now that I genuinely can control, that I need to control because I'm a control freak? I need to control something. And I was like, well, you know what, Anik? Your health. You need to take your health in priority. So I was like, all right. Let this business crap sit aside for now. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get my supplement stuff down. I'm going to focus on my health more. And I started going to the gym, and it's like a month or 2 months. So I would listen to music, and I started getting bored of that. And then I was like, all right, let me listen to podcasts. I popped in one podcast, random day. I'm on a freaking elliptical machine. And that podcast episode was like the and all of a sudden the ideas came. I got clarity. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And I'll tell people, you may not. So Scott mentioned it. He didn't know exactly how he was going to do it, but you have a moment where you're like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Like that's it, right? Like I knew I'm going to marry that girl. Now I didn't know she was going to put me through 4 years of quite the hell to get her married. Like good for you, man. 6 months. You got to teach me something. Not now. I mean, I'm married, but hell, I had to work hard, man. So 4 years and best 4-year investment I've ever made. But I knew I'm going to marry her. I didn't know how I was going to marry her. So you just need to know what you're going to do. You don't necessarily need to know how. That's part of the journey. Something else you want to add on this? Otherwise, I got like 16 other things I want to move into.
And then we can move on. But when my son Arrow was born in June of 2022, I was doing all this, a little bit of this investment stuff and advisory stuff, but it was like an 80-20 split. So like 80% of my time was still on the, paid, running my own business, everything else. And so like within 2 weeks of him coming, I'm like, yo, I got to go all in. Like, I don't want to spend time on anything. I don't want to spend time away from him ever, unless it has a considerable return, right? Considerable return. Yes. And so I'm like, I got ready for, I spent 2 years changing my life, changing the way I do my calendar, changing the way that I literally sell, changing the way that I mentor, that advise, so that wasn't always on phone calls, because I was used to being on call after call after call after call after call. And so I was like, all right, none of that. But even further, I was like, you know what? When he's 5, when he's 6, we're homeschooling him. And when he's 5, when he's 6, when he's 7, my next version of my life is I never have to be on a phone call ever, period. Mm-hmm. Done. My other part of my life is I'm making a lot of money, even if I'm not on a phone call, period. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, okay, how do I do that? All right, cool. I'll make less money in So in 2022, I made the least amount of money I made since 2016 in terms of revenue. Right? Why? Because I didn't do sale calls. I just said no to working with people, all of that. And I also increased my net worth more in 1 year than any other year ever. Right? And in 2 years from now, I will only be an advisor and investor. I will not be running my own business, because that doesn't go with my next version of life. And if it wasn't for my kid, I would have never dedicated all in on that, because that all in is a little bit scary. But I'm like, you know what? I want the version of being able to, just not be on phone calls. And I want a version of, this is the version of life I want to live with him and with my wife. And so I was like, that's it. And that drove me to have more momentum in the last 9 months than any period in my life, and work the least amount that I've ever worked in my life.
Holy shit.
Besides my sabbatical.
1000% agree. How old is your son?
9 months.
My daughter just turned 10 months like last week. Come on, man. I didn't even know that before. I already said we have a lot of stuff in similar. I had a student of mine in our mastermind said something to me on the phone the other day I found fascinating. He said, Anik, I'm convinced that you have more than 24 hours in the day. I'm convinced that physics don't apply to you. The time doesn't apply to you. And I laughed and I said, that might be the greatest compliment I've heard in a long time, because, my friend, I work less now than I ever have in my life before. And he's just looking at me. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I oversee multiple companies. But here's the thing. I don't start working till at least post 9 a.m. because my daughter's up from 6 to 9, and I'm usually there for most of that. And I'm home by 5:30 at the latest, because my daughter goes to bed by 7:30. So I'm missing those last 2 hours. And I do still come to an office. And a lot of times I work half the day from home or whatever, but I was like, these have become absolute definitions now. These are like these are just, very rarely do I violate these rules. And I said, so that just forced me to re-innovate my systems and how I do things, and it got my certain team members to step up, and it got me to say no to certain projects. Also, Scott, what I've said,
your boundaries will define your life. If there's a phone call, I don't do phone calls on Mondays, and I don't do phone calls on Thursdays. 0 phone calls. On Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 to 3 is my only phone call hours whatsoever. So 4 days a week, there's no phone calls ever. On top, like ever, doesn't matter what it is. By 2025, I'll have 1 day, because I don't want to be on phone calls. That's not my life. I don't want. And I guarantee you, I pass up so many opportunities because of that boundary. But you know what it does do? It filters the best opportunities, because I have exact. And a lot of the time, entrepreneurs do a bunch of shit they don't need to be doing just because they want to like get it going. But if you have those filters and those boundaries, and you're just like, I can't do it. When someone's like, hey, you know what? I want to get on a phone call. I'm like, if you want to send an audio message, awesome. But like, I'll see you next June.
Yeah. I love this. The boundary thing has been huge for me. And I just keep making my boundaries. What I'm finding is I'm getting the boundaries like what you're doing. I'm just making them closer and closer and closer. And what I find is I'm becoming more powerful, more efficient, getting more done, happier. And we as entrepreneurs, we have this fear of decreasing the boundary size, because we're like, oh, I need more time. No, you figure it out. You figure out better systems. For me, I've had more opportunities come by my way this last year. I've accelerated more this year, of the outcome of which you will see in 2023 and 2024, but I've done it in an environment unlike any I've ever had before for a personal life and health. All right. So fascinating stuff to everyone who's listening. I don't know how many golden nuggets there are here that you probably need to listen to this stuff again and give yourselves a lot of permission to apply what we're talking about. There's a few things you've said I want to pull and pick into real quick. We'll try to do these quickly, because I want to get, the main thing is I really wanted to get into what is this $100 million and what makes up that, and what's your philosophy on business. You mentioned something earlier that was fascinating to me, which was 300 businesses. You have helped or you've run 300 businesses past 7 figures. Real quick, without like what would you say are like the 1, 2, or 3 common things you like? That's a big number. That's not luck. That's system. There's something you're doing. What is that 1, 2, or 3 things that you're going in and you're like tweak, 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 and it goes to 7 figures? Like there's something you figured out.
Yeah. So my book, The Nuclear Effect, which has had, I think, almost 80,000 copies sold now, which is for a business book, is honestly shocking to me. And so I talk about 6 pillars. So, and this is, it doesn't matter what business, but you have marketing, you have sales, operations, delivery, mindset, finance. You align those, basically, if you just on a piece of paper every single week, you just took those, put in every single problem. And then next week, you and your team solved all the possible problems on that. And you just kept on doing that on repeat, like a hamster wheel. You'll eventually get to 7+ figures, right? It's inevitable, right? We did this didn't work. Let's kind of do it. And so then inside of those things, there's like, yes, there's systems for everything, right? So you have systems for marketing and sales and operation, all these different types of things. I would say, like once you're at 25,000 a month, like your first 25,000 a month is pretty much grit and hustle, and just persistence. There's actually, there's not much beyond that, right? And you have different unfair advantages, right? You have 5 currencies. You either have time, you have money, you have influence, you have audience, or you have expertise, right? So one of those 5 things, or those multiple, those are your unfair advantages, right? So you have more money, well, you can spend money on ads right away. You have more audience, well, you can put out an offer, make money right away. You have influence, you can come to someone like me or you, and we're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, let me put you in partner in front. So your first, let's call it up to 300,000-400,000 a year, generally is based upon those things, right? So when people come to me, I'm like, go and figure out how to make more money, or how to get audience, or how to become better at what you do. And then after that, it's marketing systems, and then offer systems, and then team systems. And then really it's just a matter of time. And then I would say the overarching part of everything is the mindset, because your mindset's going to depict how you do something, right? So if your mindset is, well, I want to get a return on ad spend in the first week, well, you might take 2 years trying to get that return on ad spend. But if you said, well, I'm going to get a return on ad spend in 60 days, well, that might only take you 60 days to be able to get a return on ad spend. And then boom, you're done. So most of the time it's mindset that is changing. It's just you have society mindset, or your parents' mindset. You just have the right mindset around whether it's funnels or audience or all of these different types of things. And then so once you solve that, everything else kind of makes it make easy at the end of the day. So that's generally what it is. And when people come to me, and when I work with people, I just look, hey, what unfair advantages do you have? And then what's the shortcut to use those unfair advantages? And let's get you to $1 million, because 2 million to 2.5 million is the easiest place to get to. You extract the profit, you stabilize, and then you can decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to create a $5 million business? Do you want to build a business and sell it? Let's get some money in the bank. Let's get you the car you want, the house you want. Let's get those things, because that's level 1 of what you need: safety, security. Level 2 are your goals, the car you want, those types of things. And then you can actually say, all right, what type of business do I want to build? Right? Because the first business you build to 7 figures, multiple 7 figures, really isn't your intentional business. It's kind of like whatever happened, you put a bunch of shit together, and some of it worked, some of it didn't. But then you get to build the intentionality around, all right, here's what I want my life to look like. Here's what I want my business to look like. And it sort of like buys you the ability to do that. Yeah. And I want to say that I don't believe that everybody can have a 7-figure business, because the world wouldn't work if that was the case. So what I'm saying is that if you're an entrepreneur, if you have I'll say entrepreneurial DNA, that is how I would do it. And that's how I've done it, 300 plus times.
And also, I just want to throw the disclaimer out there for everybody. Just, we simplify things for the benefit of giving you those ideas and aha moments, but it's not like, we didn't just say, oh, you can make $1 million. It's super easy. Not at all. It's actually pretty hard. And it takes, like he said, the beginning part of it is just grit. And it's just, I call it boots on the ground. Like whenever I'm teaching people, I'm like, I'll have I love no offense to them at all if you're one of them, but I love the entrepreneurs that are like that 300,000-400,000 a year. They have the most swagger. They have like the biggest egos sometimes. And I'm just looking at them and kind of the thing I've said, because I teach scale, and the thing I've said is, you're not even a business yet. You're just playing. I'm like, until you're at $500,000, you don't even have proof of concept. Once you're at $500,000, I believe you have proof of concept, which means you might be able to do this. Like, proof of concept means like, all right, we think we have something strong. If you want to be a business in my eyes, if you want me to look at you as a business, you have to do $1 million. $1 million means if you've done $1 million in a year, there are some repeatable systems and things going on in your business that can be scaled. But I just like the fact that, yeah, we follow the same types of numbers. All right, so we're gonna jump around a little bit. I'm gonna ask you some questions. You said something else that really got my attention, which was, you said in 2022 you made the least money, but you increased your net worth the most. You and I are jiving along the same lines of thought process. A lot of our listeners would be fascinated by it. What do you mean by that, and why is that a good thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the wealthier I get, the more broke I am. I've never felt more broke, maybe since I was in debt, than I do at the current moment. And because at the end of the day, I'm putting my both money and time and resources into things that won't pay me back for probably 3 years. I won't get any really return for 3 years. So like, last year, I think I ended up on the consulting mentorship side doing like 3.5 million. My memory serves me right, somewhere around 3.5 million. Which honestly, I'll be honest with you, for only having 3 team members and, having a kid, I'm pretty happy with. I thought it was going to be maybe 2.5. I did about $1 million more than I thought I would do. This year, I'd say that number is probably going to be about the same, right? About the same, maybe even a little less. And so really the truth of it is that I've been spending the majority of my time having ownership, crafting deals, acquiring businesses that, put my net worth. I won't say exactly what I would estimate my net worth is, but really freaking high, if I'm completely honest with you. Kind of like one of those, like, wow, that happened overnight type of moments. And so, but it's not real money. It's like, I can't go take it out on a bank account, the way that you would think about money as when you're, sub 10 million net worth, generally speaking, for most entrepreneurs, even maybe sub 5 million, you could probably access most of your money within like 7 days. Right. Once you get above 5 million in net worth, the amount of money that you can't access within, say, 6 to 12 months starts to drastically increase, especially if you're investing in businesses. So, and I'm also not a type of person that just, I just don't operate. What I love is like, whenever I'm making money, I'm always continually investing it. So I keep like 45 days of money in the bank. That's it. And I mean, obviously I have the ability to take money out if I needed it to, but that makes it so that I keep looking at my money, right? I remember first, at one point I had millions of dollars in the bank. I mean, 100 grand could go missing and I literally wouldn't know the difference. I literally, if you log in and there's $2.8 million and in 2 weeks you log in as 2.7, you don't register at that. Right. But if I log in and there's like 150 grand in my bank account, and then next week there's 100 grand in my bank account, I'm like, where'd that 50 grand go? Yeah. Right. So that, so for me, that's a lot of, the way that I've been looking at and processing and kind of building for the future. Quite simply, I just don't have the time to put into things that makes me money right now as much as I did in the past. And I believe that this is going to make me 100 times wealthier than if I kept doing what I was doing. But it's really, really hard. Like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. It's really hard to make more money and then make less money when it comes to like cash and Stripe, PayPal, bank transfers. That like, it is really, really, really mentally difficult to do that and make that transition, which is probably why so many people don't do it.
Yeah, no. And I wanted everyone to hear that. There's a point in time at which you're you make enough income, guys. I mean, there's a point in time at which, like, if you make more, your life just doesn't change. But that cash is not worth it. Cash is trash. It's like you've got to have that money invested. And one of the things I remember hearing Grant Cardone say that resonated with me was he was just like, I'm constantly cash broke. He's like, I try to be as cash broke as humanly possible. I want my money invested because I want my money to be working for me and I want it to be growing. I flipped my focus personally from income to net worth back in probably 2019, 2020. And yeah, exactly. And yeah, you could take money out of my bank account and I probably won't know, but if you drop my net worth, I'll know real quick. Like I track that number. Another couple of quick hits and then we get to the $100 million. You talked about like the 5 things, right? The nuclear effect, those 5 assets you can have. And when you were talking about it, it made me connect to something you recently made a post about on social media where you said, I think I have the number right. You raised $3 million for one of your businesses. Was it 3 million?
So I'm raising, so right now I'm raising 4 million at the current moment. I've raised 1.2 of that in about 10 days so far. Later this year, that's then going to convert into a convertible note, and I'll probably raise 10 million on that convertible note.
So whenever we talk about raising money, most people's imagination or most people's vision immediately flips to PowerPoint, guy in a suit, hits the road, VCs, angels, presentation, rejection. I've been a part of a company that raised money that sold. I wasn't, thank God, I was not the CEO of it. I was the passive. Best job I ever had was to invest in that company and do nothing. But I watched the CEO grind. I am talking about cold email outreach to hundreds of people, massive rejection, major presentations, flying, Zoom meetings. That's not what you did. You used a VSL and a Google Doc. What do you think allowed you to do that? And talk a little bit about just that, because was it the audience? Was it the influence? Was it the years? Did you have some secret, words on that document?
My number one, my intention was, like, I've known I'm going to be a billionaire since the time I was a kid. Like, I just knew it. Right. And I'm not there yet, but I would expect that I'll be a billionaire by the time I'm at least 40, like worst case. So when I started mentoring people and realizing that my skills and expertise were really good at being able to help people 7 figures, I said, okay, this is really fucking easy, actually. Sorry if you can't swear on here, but this is really easy. If I help make 1,000 millionaires, it's pretty much impossible for me not to be a billionaire, right? Like, it's pretty much impossible for me not to have the value transfer, because everything in life is value transfer. Right. So if you help somebody have a $5 million business, you're going to get a value transfer from that. So I just messaged a couple of my former clients that I've all helped become millionaires. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to be in on it? And I just sent them a Google Doc, and they were like, cool. How much would you suggest I put in? And I'm like, well, I can't really necessarily tell you, but I mean, like 100 to 250, and you're not going to miss it. And you're going to get returns for as long as I'm doing this stuff. And I mean, in reality, I could probably have raised 5 by now, but I've been doing other things. And I also want to be, I've been raising slowly, just because this is new to me. I've always been an investor. I've never taken investment. I'm not taking investment from firms and from private equity, from any of that type of stuff. I'm taking really just from entrepreneurs that have extra money lying around. And they believe in me, right? That's really it. And so because of that context, it's very different. I send over a 3-page contract with what the terms are, and they're like, cool, sweet. What's your bank info? And they give me the money, and that's it. And I'm like, hey, we'll do a 2-day event once a year. You come, I'll show you what's going on, and we'll network and have a good time. A mastermind built in. And so that's really that, that's essentially what how I went about it. And I knew I wanted to. I mean, the reason I'm raising money, quite honestly, is because I need to get away from the mentorship side of things more deeply, and I can't afford to do both. I can't decrease. I'm not in the position to decrease my mentorship and increase the investment into Wisdom Group, which is my portfolio company, at the same time. And I said, okay, let me raise some money so I can separate those, so that, you know, if shit hits the fan, the worst case scenario, I offload all the companies, pay back the investors, but I'm still good. Right? It's not like I'm going down with the company. Yeah. So there's part of that, and I mean, I've invested millions of dollars into the Wisdom Group of my own money at this point. And so I want to, I can only bring it so far, because it's just, you know, once you get momentum and once you have growth costs a lot of money. So overall, very simple to raise the money. And honestly, it's easier to raise money than it, at least for me, it's been easier to raise money than it is to get people to pay me for one-on-one, like working with me. And I'm like, wow. Yeah. Right. And I don't have to deliver. All I have to deliver them back is money. I don't even have to get on the phone with them. I'm like, this is a great deal. So that's been my philosophy there. And again, I have a massive unfair advantage where they're looking at my track record and they're like, this guy, I'm not a typical founder. Yeah. And it's like this guy literally, if the worst case scenario, they'll probably get double on their money.
You know, it's so funny. You mentioned easier to raise money than to sell mentoring. I haven't personally raised money in 2019. I was thinking about it. So I wanted to branch off something. We were doing something, and I decided I wanted to raise $1.5 million to branch it off, and didn't need to, but I was strategic about it. I was like, I want to raise money, but I also want to have these people involved because it will help like grow that company faster. And I was shocked that within about 4 or 5 days of text messaging people that I've done a lot of business with and worked with, who know me and who have added value in their lives verbally. I mean, I didn't have the wire, but verbally they were like, yeah, I'm in. And basically what I said was, I want 10 people, 150 each. That's what I'm looking for. You in or not? And it was through text. I think I only spoke on the phone with maybe 3 of them. The rest of them were like, yeah. I haven't spoken on the phone with anybody. Yeah, which is incredible. Yeah. So I just want to give.
If I literally took tomorrow, Saturday, on my phone, I could probably, and both of us could do this, I could probably raise the entire amount. Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised. So again, not highlighting this moment for everyone who's watching to say that you can do the same, but there is this, you know, why do the rich become richer? Why is it easier to make money the richer you are? I think a lot of people use it as this like evil thing where like rich people have like, it's not necessarily that. It's that as you've gained that wealth and experience, the connections you've made, the people you've been around, the people you've served, it just becomes easier. So if your goal is to provide value in the world, the people to whom you're providing value, it double stacks, triple stacks, quadruple stacks eventually. So the reason Scott or I are able to go out and raise money really quickly if we want to isn't because it's because of the 20 years or 15 years or 10 years of whatever we've been doing in the market and the people we've been helping. So awesome stuff. Just to show people there is like this exponential return of the investment in people, time, and value that you make today. So stop thinking about it as just what you get today. There's like this huge return you can't put in. It's an infinite return. You can't put a value on it.
Well, it's like this. It's like every single one-on-one client or someone I've mentored since 2019. I really realized this in 2018, 2019. Every single person, because if it was for the money, it's just easier for me to go build a business model where I don't need to like actually mentor someone directly, right? Like it's easier to build that business because it wouldn't have my time. But the entire reason was all of these people will be either my business partners or my investors in the future for the next 40 years. Yeah. That's why I do it.
100%.
The little bit of money that they give me today from my time and my energy, that's peanuts. I'm looking at their potential for what they're doing as an entrepreneur. And I'm like, I'm going to bet on them. Yeah. And I think that's a major difference than most people, I would say, in the coaching and mentorship industry, because they're really just like trying to hit their numbers at the end of the day.
Well, it makes perfect sense. All right. We're already officially the longest episode I've ever had in the Onyx and Gall show. So I'm having a ball, man. And I've got 2 topics I want to hit while I have you, because I know your time is precious. first is just at a high level, 100 million a year. Break that down for me. I think it's your wisdom group. How does it work? You did mention before 36 companies. What types of companies are these? Do you have some kind of rules? How much equity are you taking in them to justify the level of involvement? And what's the exit goal here? Do these start to sell one by one? Or give me a little bit of the vision of the wisdom group that I guess you would tell your investors.
Yeah, so I mean, I could definitely do a whole hour and a half on this specifically, but I'll try to condense it in as much as I possibly can. So, I have three things that I believe are going to grow and continue to grow over the next 10 to 20 years. I believe that is media, I believe that is education, and I believe that is software. I would say that education and media I'm more bullish on than I am software. And so the play is in two sides, is in the entrepreneurship and business niche, and then the lifestyle, personal development, self-improvement niche, right? Two things that I'm very passionate on, that I know incredibly well. And so we own 36 businesses in those verticals. And so generally speaking, some of the businesses, particularly in the media, we own completely. We own 100%. We've acquired them 100%. So some of the businesses we own 100%. Majority of the businesses we own 49% or less. Okay. And so a lot of the time, and this is anywhere from 10% to 49%. I won't go any lower than 10% because a lot of the time it's not worth being part of it. And I want somebody else to be leading it, right? So I'm not here trying to have like quote unquote ownership. I have predefined exit terms. So if we don't work, I pull the exit term, you buy me out, and see you later. And so, a lot of the education is mostly accredited programs and certification programs, because I believe the future of education is in certifications and accreditation. All the software companies are tuck-in software companies. So majority of these software companies are by themselves. They would not work. They do not make sense, meaning there's either they cannot really compete with what's out there, or their marketing and sales just wouldn't make sense. But because they're part of an entire ecosystem that's able to take care of all the marketing and lead generation and sales, they basically take up revenue month about month, and they add the ability to be able to exit them. And then, of course, media, because I believe that over the next 10 years, we are going to become more about. So I think there's going to be this big thing about AI. And I think then there's going to be a lot of people that are like, you know what, I actually want to create my own algorithm, and I actually want to self-select what I am actually paying attention to. And we're already seeing this. Have seen this over the last 5 years. And so a large part of that is owning websites, blogs, newsletters, and podcasts. So platforms that we literally own, right? Email addresses, mailing addresses, and phone numbers that we own the ability to be in front of them. And so the idea of it is that everything kind of creates the network effect, where somebody comes in through a newsletter, and then they buy 2 months later a certification. And then because now they're in the certification, they're utilizing a piece of our software, and then the cycle kind of continues and the whole thing grows. So that's how it works at the current moment. And that's the investment thesis into the future. And so the idea of it is to have hundreds of these companies inside of the Wisdom Group. And in terms of exiting them, I mean, when you exit a single company, you don't really get a great deal. And there's not that many people to buy it. You're really limited to either competitors or private equity. And both of those deals a lot of the time suck. But if you take 10 or 20 companies and you bring them together and they all are helping each other, then you're able to exit them. And so the idea of it is that we're always bringing in new companies, acquiring, partnering new companies, and we're always creating essentially these boxes of companies inside of Wisdom Group that are getting ready to sell, to be able to both pay back investors as well as fuel the company for growth going into the future. Sure. So that's how we're doing that.
It's an umbrella with many umbrellas underneath of it, and each of those umbrellas might be sellable, but you're not looking at each of the companies. And that goes back to something we were talking pre-podcast, and where you and I kind of share a lot of same thought processes on. I think to build a company that's going to sell for 100 million or more is hard. The odds are against you, and you might be better off betting in a casino. What I have done, and this is what Scott said, and this is what Scott has done, I have built many companies, multiple companies, into 7 and a few into 8. I kind of know how to get to 8 figures now. I think I've got the system down. I can repeat it pretty regularly. That's not that hard. I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy to do. For me, having done it now, that's not that hard to do. It's easier for me to do that again and again and again and again and again and collectively build something that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars versus to aim to get the one company that's going to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's basically the underlying philosophy of what I'm building, which is a portfolio business, and seems to be what you're doing. Except I like how you shared, hey, these are the 3 areas. And I like how you said you got buckets, so you can sell buckets.
Everything outside of that, I will not invest in. I will not look at. I don't care. Those are the things I'm doing. And I mean, listen, I can sneeze and do a multi 7-figure business at this point. Like I can literally, it's like, I don't even have to think about it. And I'm same with you on the 8-figure, a little bit more complicated, it takes a little bit more time. Yeah, I can do it. But my investment philosophy is a ton of $3 to $7 million companies. That's really it. Right. And I'm solving the traffic problem with media. I'm solving the reoccurring revenue with SaaS, and I'm having the high ticket philosophy with the education. So I've also blended in the 3 largest problems: cash flow, reoccurring, and being able to actually drive traffic.
Yeah. Yes. I was just going to say the high ticket is what drives the profitability. The traffic is driven through the media, and then the recurring, the true value, because investors love MRR, comes from those softwares, but those softwares are reliant on the other 2 things, so they all work as a package. Brilliant freaking stuff. And guys, if you didn't catch that, go back and listen to that last bit again, because I'm telling you right now, it's not just Scott and I'm seeing a few other very smart marketers move in this direction. They're doing the transition from operator to investor. And many of us, it's just we're on the same life cycle. We've been operating for just long enough to now no longer want to operate. And so we're figuring out, hey, how do I get out of the day-to-day operations? Well, investing, portfolio, and using our wisdom and our advice to give to those companies. And the biggest thing is using our clout. So I'm able to come into a company and get equity, not only for the advice I bring, but for the fact that the day I get that equity, the next day I can triple, quadruple, 5x their user base just by being involved in it. And that's been something interesting. But again, that took time to build up to. Last question. All right. And I'll swear I'll let you go. And this is a selfish question. I don't care if anyone else listening doesn't get anything out of it. You've written a lot of books. You're writing another book. I've written books. I have a lot of books. I have what I call marketing books, which I have a really quick system to get done in there, and there's a lot of them, and I'm kind of done with those now. Like the books that were the lead gens, like I used in the B2C industry, I'm kind of done. I don't think I'm ever going to write another one of those. I have a legacy books, I call them. These are books that, I would go and hand to people, right, and look them in the eyes and say, this book will change your life, or this book will give you a major aha. I have 2, arguably 3. And they were really hard to write. They took forever. And, Tony Robbins was once asked, why don't you write any more books or whatever? And Tony's like, that's like the freaking hardest thing to do in the world is write a book. I'm sitting on one right now, Scott. It's called The 17 Laws of Scale. I think it's brilliant. My team has listened to my audios. I audio articulated the whole thing. The team has listened to it and said, this might be one of the best books that they've heard come out of me. They've been with me for 10 plus years. The first draft was written by my team, by my content team. It's good, but it's just, I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to go out. And the only thing I can see is I'm going to have to sit down, and I know how I did this with my book Escape. I rewrote the whole thing word for word, and it has to have the style, the stories, the feel. Like Alex Hormozy, I think he was on record saying he spent like 1,000 hours or some ridiculous number getting his 100 million offers book done. But I think the results speak for themselves. And so what's your process, man? I mean, The Nuclear Effect has gone out, 80,000 people. It's got raving reviews.
That's a terrible book too, by the way. Like, I hate that book.
All right, there we go. So this next one, what's the process? Is it just a grunt? Do we just have to grunt it out? Is that the solution?
I mean, it just sucks. So I got this book, Million in the Red. I thought it was done, and I sent it to my wife, and she said, this book sucks. And I was like, damn it. So I'm on my fourth rewrite.
Can you give your wife a high five for me for that? That's awesome.
I know. She's like, you can publish this, but it sucks, and in a nice way. I'm paraphrasing. And so, you know, I've been working on this book for, I guess, a year and a half now. That one, Nuclear Effect, took 3 years, and that one, you know, sucked as it is. Writing a book sucks. And, you know, most books suck to start with. And lead generation books suck even more because nobody really, like, people are just like, whatever. So, you know, I think, and like, I have, like, I'll say, like, one of the books that I really want to write, I won't say the name of it because I don't have it trademarked and everything else yet, but I know that book's going to suck even more. Like, that book's going to suck 10,000 times more than this book. And anybody that says that they want to write a book, I'd be like, yeah, like, it's kind of like this. Like, the people are like, you know, what do you think about being, you know, someone that hasn't had a kid? You know, what do you think about being a dad? You know, would you recommend it? I'm like, unless you're called to being a dad, don't be a dad. And the same way, the same way with a book. If you don't want to be an author, and you don't, like, it has to feel as if you got to get like a poop out of you. And if it's not that, don't write a book, because it just sucks. It sucks so bad. It's probably the most unmotivating thing there is. And as soon as you put it out there, you're like, this thing sucks. And then someone's like, oh, I read your book. And you're like, great, wonderful, great. And then they're like, hey, I want to work with you. And I'm like, I don't know what you read that I didn't read, but you know, what is not so yeah. Right. I think it amazes me every day when we get the year or the monthly, you know, book order update, and I'm like how many people? And it's embarrassing, you know, but people love it, so I keep on doing it.
So that's what I needed to hear. I just needed to hear that, because I got the book in front of me. It needs me. I mean, it's my book. It needs me. And I'm like, and I was going through the catalog the other day. I'm like, okay, I got a bunch of other funnels I can launch. That book's staring me in the face. I want to put it out there. I think the world needs to see it. It's
been on my get-to-do list for 3 months now to do the next version. So I need a bunch of bottles of wine. I need a bunch of bottles of wine and like 5 days, and maybe I'll get like a good version.
There you go. So what I decided was, I was like, Onik, there's only one thing that's going to do this. I need to power up my big Apple headphones. I need to crank some music, and I need a week where I sweet talk my wife into like, hey, I'm not going to even like, I'm going to see my daughter, but I'm not going to be the daily dad that you're seeing. Like, I'm going to obsess. I'm going to go in the corner, and I'm just going to write. And I don't care if the house is on fire. I'm not responding. Everyone else come take care of the fires. And I was telling myself, I'm like, is there another way? And I'm like, I think this just has to be this way.
The Nuclear Effect book, and then after this, I got to go. But the Nuclear Effect book, I finished that book. You know, I rented a place in Ojai here in California, and this little cottage, and I took 4 days there, half a dozen bottles of wine, and I don't drink very much at all. Okay. Like whatsoever. I don't think I've drank in like about a year at this point, if not more. And but this is 2019. Yeah, 2019. And I just went there, and I was like, I'm not having a phone. There's no internet at the cottage. And I'm just on my, like, you know, Pages app in Apple, just going through. And I'm like, I finally got it done. And I was like, you know what? I'm done now. Everybody else and their feedback can go take a hike. This thing's done, and I'm going to go get back to doing something else. It's not fun.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, listen, man, what a freaking amazing episode. Thank you so much. I have to have you back, so I'm not even going to ask you. You're just going to be back one of these days for another episode. Before everyone can go, where can they buy your sucky book, The Nuclear Effect?
Totally buy The Nuclear Effect, thenucleareffect.com, or you can buy it on Amazon. And then everything else is on scottoldford.com.
Say that one more time. Where can people follow you, get to know you, and get all your stuff?
Absolutely. Just my first name, last name.com, scottoldford.com.
All right. Awesome. Everyone's going to be in the show notes. If you're on YouTube watching this, go ahead right now. It's in the description, but make sure you also click subscribe and like share and all that crap, and leave a comment and all that jazz. Okay. If you're on audio platforms, make sure you subscribe to us, leave us a great review, help the show get up. We're going to be bringing you amazing people like Scott. This was a powerful episode. Scott, thank you so much. Guys, you know what I always say. When life pushes you, stand straight, smile, and push it the heck back. Love you all. See you on the next episode. onyxshow.com. Make sure you are there, you are binging, and you're engaging. Scott, you're the man. Talk to you later, man. See ya.